You know, when you look at the architectural blueprints for an ancient fortress, there is this incredible expectation of like structural perfection.
Oh, absolutely. Every stone has a very specific purpose.
Right. Every wall is measured to the millimeter and the foundation is engineered to withstand absolute chaos. I mean, it is a masterpiece of physical security. You build a thick enough wall, you stockpile enough supplies, and theoretically, you just keep all the danger on the outside.
It's a very tangible, comforting way to view the world, honestly. In the ancient Near East, a walled city was literally the ultimate barrier between life and death during a siege.
Yeah.
So yeah, the physical structure was everything.
But then you step out from behind those physical walls and into the landscape of human behavior, into how we actually communicate and relate to one another, and suddenly that architectural blueprint is useless.
Yeah, completely useless.
We are looking at a psychological landscape that is incredibly fragile. We constantly try to build up these massive defenses in our personal lives to protect ourselves, but we often use the entirely wrong materials. So, for you listening today, our mission for this deep dive is to examine the ultimate blueprint for human behavior. We're looking at the ancient wisdom found in Proverbs 18.
Which is such a rich text.
It really is. We are going straight to the source to summarize these teachings, and then, in under 9 minutes, pivot to how we can practically apply them to modern life to establish a totally different kind of security and strengthen our trust and relationship with God.
Proverbs 18 is, well, it's a fascinating text to unpack. To sort of set the stage, it's part of a larger collection of wisdom literature traditionally attributed to King Solomon.
Right, the classic wisdom texts.
Exactly, and when you analyze this specific chapter, a few core themes really emerge. The author deals heavily with the immense, almost terrifying power of human language.
That's a huge one.
It is. The text also forces a continuous comparison between the outcomes of pride versus the outcomes of humility, and it underscores the critical, really life or death importance of how we handle our relationships.
Wow, so it covers a lot of ground.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ancient authors are directly targeting psychological flaws that are just as prevalent today as they were, 3,000 years ago. The technology around us has evolved, but the fundamental machinery of the human heart really has not.
And that structural similarity between the ancient and modern mind is exactly where we need to start. Because before the text even addresses the power of our words or the way we treat our neighbors, it identifies the exact environment where foolishness takes root.
Yeah, and that environment is isolation.
Right. It starts with isolation.
Proverbs 18 attacks this concept immediately, right, in verses 1 and 2. The text says that a person who separates himself is seeking his own desire, and he intermeddles with all sound wisdom.
Intermeddles, that's a pretty archaic word.
It is. In Elizabethan English, which is what the King James Version uses, to intermeddle in this context actually means to aggressively quarrel against or defy.
Oh, wow. So it's not just like accidentally getting in the way.
No, not at all. The text is saying that a person who isolates themselves is openly warring against common sense. In the ancient context, community life was a biological and economic necessity.
Right. You couldn't just survive on your own.
Exactly. Survival depended entirely on cooperation and shared knowledge. So withdrawing from the community wasn't viewed as just, needing some alone time. It was viewed as actively rejecting shared wisdom and completely avoiding accountability.
That makes a lot of sense.
And verse 2 takes it even further. It states that a fool takes no delight in actually understanding an issue. Instead, their only goal is to discover and express their own heart.
Which is essentially a poetic way of saying they just want to broadcast their own unexamined opinions.
Precisely. They just want to hear themselves talk.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mechanics of isolation today look completely different on the surface, but they function the exact same way underneath. I mean, isolation today isn't necessarily packing up and moving to a cabin off the grid.
Right. It's much more subtle now.
Today, isolation is heavily disguised as connection. It is the curation of a digital echo chamber. We have the technological ability to surround ourselves, online and in our social circles, exclusively with voices that completely agree with our pre-existing worldview.
We just systematically block, mute, or avoid the rest.
Exactly. It is the equivalent of standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon and shouting your own name solely for the dopamine hit of hearing your own echo bounce back. You aren't participating in communication, you are just verifying your own biases.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And when you only hear your own echo, the psychological result is that you convince yourself your perspective is the only objective reality.
Because everyone around you is saying the exact same thing.
Right. You take no delight in understanding alternative viewpoints, exactly as the proverb describes, because the echo chamber has already assured you that you possess the absolute truth. You lose the ability to pressure test your own ideas.
Let me play devil's advocate here, though. We live in a society where the sheer volume of information and, frankly, outrage is deafening. People are aggressive, and the discourse is toxic.
Oh, absolutely. It's exhausting.
So isn't it a valid psychological defense mechanism to avoid collaboration and just shut out opposing voices to protect our own mental peace? Dealing with constant friction seems like a fast track to burnout.
Well, setting healthy boundaries against actual abuse is always necessary.
Yeah.
But we have to distinguish between abuse and constructive friction.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
What this text argues is that true wisdom actually requires the friction of a diverse community. An isolated piece is incredibly fragile because it is totally untested.
Interesting.
In verse 15 of this same chapter, the author writes, "The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge." Notice the emphasis on the ear.
Ah, the ear, meaning listening.
Exactly. The text defines a prudent heart as one that actively listens. Listening carefully to a perspective you disagree with, not just pausing to reload your own argument, but genuinely trying to comprehend, is framed as the ultimate sign of wisdom.
It's like building intellectual muscle.
Yes. Just like an immune system needs exposure to pathogens to build strength, our minds need the friction of opposing ideas to build intellectual resilience.
And if we lack that friction, if our isolation makes us intellectually blind, it makes perfect sense what happens next. We step right into the second major trap Proverbs 18 warns about, the rush to judgment.
The mechanics of how we process information are laid out brilliantly here in verses 13 and 17.
What do they say?
Verse 13 is blunt. It says, "He that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him."
Ouch. Yeah, that's pretty direct.
And then verse 17 provides a very practical legal observation. "He that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him."
Searches him, like investigating.
Yet to search him, in this ancient context, means to cross-examine. In the ancient city gates where local disputes were settled, the elders knew that fair decisions required patiently listening to multiple witnesses.
Because the first story always sounds right.
Exactly. The first person to present their grievance always sounds incredibly convincing and logically sound until the other party arrives and provides the missing context.
I look at that and think it might be the most thoroughly modern problem in the entire document. I mean, our entire media and social ecosystem financially rewards the fastest reaction, not the most accurate one.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
The race to be first is destroying accuracy.
We have an epidemic of people answering a matter before they actually hear the whole thing. It is exactly like watching a slow-motion sports replay from just one isolated camera angle.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right. From that first angle, it looks like an absolute, undeniable, flagrant foul. The first person to present their case seems right. The outrage feels totally justified.
You're ready to yell at the referee.
Exactly. But then the broadcast switches to the alternate angle from behind the play, and you suddenly realize no contact was actually made. The first angle was a complete optical illusion.
What's fascinating here is that cognitive bias anchoring onto the first piece of information we receive is precisely what the ancient author is warning against.
It's human nature.
It is. Our modern impulse to instantly take sides, which is usually driven by a fear of missing out on the cultural conversation, completely short-circuits fair judgment. The text posits that patience, intentional delay, and careful investigation are the specific antidotes to this folly.
So we have to force ourselves to wait.
Right. It urges the reader to pause and let the neighbor come and search the matter. It is a call to tolerate ambiguity until all the facts are in.
And if we just kept those premature, one-sided judgments in our heads, the damage would be, contained. But the reality is, we speak them out loud. We type them out.
We hit send.
Exactly. If our perception is fundamentally flawed by our isolation, the words we generate from that perception become incredibly dangerous. This text essentially moves us from the trap of the echo chamber to the reality of the weaponized tongue.
Which brings us to, arguably, the most famous thesis statement of this entire chapter, found in verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue.
That's a heavy statement. Death and life.
It is. The author does not leave room for a neutral middle ground, and this theme is woven throughout the surrounding verses. In verse 4, the words of a wise person are compared to a deep, flowing brook.
Which is life-sustaining, especially in an arid climate.
It's exactly something refreshing. But in verse 7, the mechanism of destruction is revealed. It says, A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul.
A snare, like a trap.
Right. And then verse 8 describes the specific damage of gossip. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly.
I want to stop and challenge that specific framing in verse 8 regarding the talebearer, which, yeah, is an old term for a gossiper.
Sure, go ahead.
We are culturally conditioned from childhood to minimize the impact of words. We teach kids the rhyme, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me."
Right, the classic playground defense.
We tell people to just brush it off and develop a thick skin. But this ancient text is arguing the exact opposite. It claims that gossip causes deep internal wounds, piercing the innermost parts of the belly. So why does the author frame gossip as uniquely and profoundly destructive, rather than just a superficial annoyance?
Because the author understands that gossip doesn't just damage a reputation. It fundamentally destroys the social fabric of trust.
Ah, the fabric of trust.
Yes. In ancient Hebrew anatomy and poetry, the belly or the bowels were considered the seat of deep human emotion and intuition.
Kind of like how we use the word heart today.
Exactly. A physical wound from a stick or a stone heals on the surface of the body. But when someone you trusted speaks maliciously behind your back, or when a community whispers lies about you, it creates a psychological trauma that festers.
It goes deep.
It does. It breaks the foundational trust required for human beings to coexist. That is why the text also calls a fool's lips a snare.
The hunter's trap we mentioned earlier.
Right. The mechanism here is that when you weaponize your words against someone else, you are ultimately trapping your own soul in a cycle of bitterness, paranoia, and relational disruption.
That reframes the entire concept of communication. I mean, words aren't just invisible sound waves, they are actual tools. They are hammers and chisels.
They absolutely are.
A carelessly typed email sent in a moment of unchecked frustration or a viral post lacking context can literally dismantle a person's livelihood in an hour.
We see it happen all the time.
So if we look at the progression here, our own isolation breeds cognitive blindness, our quick judgments lead to false conclusions, and our subsequent words become literal traps that destroy our communities.
It's a pretty bleak picture of human nature.
It really is. If human nature is this flawed and our own defenses are this fragile, it forces a massive question. Where does the author suggest we find actual, stable security?
Well, the text forces the reader to make a choice between two very different types of fortresses. It contrasts the false fortresses we build for ourselves with what it defines as true security.
Okay, let's break those down.
The mechanism of trust is explored in verses 10, 11, and 12. Verse 11 describes how human beings naturally seek safety. The rich man's wealth is his strong city and as a high wall in his own conceit.
Conceit. So like arrogance.
Close. The word conceit there actually means imagination.
Oh, so it's imaginary security.
Exactly. The text is describing the psychological illusion of control. Now, contrast that human instinct with verse 10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe.
A strong tower versus an imaginary wall.
Right. And verse 12 bridges these two concepts by stating the prerequisite for both outcomes. Before destruction, the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility.
Let's examine how this ancient dichotomy applies to the modern pursuit of security. Because modern culture relentlessly preaches that financial success, the acquisition of assets, and achieving total independence that is the ultimate fortress.
That's the dream we're sold, yeah.
The narrative is that if you just accumulate enough wealth, you become untouchable. You have built a strong city. But Proverbs is completely exposing the mechanism of that mindset.
It calls it out as an illusion.
Exactly. It argues that wealth as an absolute shield is a cognitive illusion. It is a high wall only in your own imagination. A market crash, a sudden severe illness, or a deeply broken family relationship can step right over a wall made of money.
It really can. The author is issuing a profound psychological and spiritual wake-up call here.
How so?
The text posits that true security is not derived from a diversified portfolio, and it certainly isn't manufactured by personal arrogance, what the text calls a haughty heart. According to this wisdom tradition, true security requires a radical shift in trust. It requires humility. The text argues that humans must submit to a higher power, relying entirely on the character and authority of the divine, represented by the name of the Lord, as their ultimate refuge.
So it's about shifting where we place our faith.
Exactly. The theological argument here is that deeply trusting God means actively relinquishing the human illusion that our wealth, our status, or our own clever arguments can save us when genuine existential storms hit.
Because money can't fix everything.
A bank account cannot heal the innermost psychological wounds we discussed earlier. The text claims only the strong tower of the divine can provide that level of holistic safety.
And if a person actually adopts that framework, I mean, if they shift their ultimate trust away from the illusion of their own self-reliance and place it externally, it fundamentally rewrites how they interact with the world.
It has to. You can't separate the two.
Relinquishing that aggressive need to protect yourself at all costs naturally changes how you treat the people around you. Which brings us to the final major concept the author explores, the immense, undeniable value of genuine human connection.
Right. The chapter addresses the practical reality of what happens when relationships are tested. Verse 19 offers a stark warning about the permanence of our actions. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle.
The bars of a castle, that's intense.
And then we see the alternative, the beautiful promise of loyalty in verse 24. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother.
A friend sticking closer than blood.
We have to remember that in the ancient world, physical survival often depended on familial loyalty. To say that a chosen friend could stick closer than blood ties was a massive paradigm shift. It spoke to a bond forged by mutual sacrifice, rather than just genetics.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The irony the author sets up here is just brilliant.
How do you mean?
We were just analyzing verse 11, where the author points out that humans wrongly rely on their wealth, treating it like a strong city. But then, just 8 verses later, the text points out that if we use our weaponized words to deeply offend a close friend, they become harder to win back than a literal strong city.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful connection.
We spend our lives frantically chasing the fake security of money, and in the process, our arrogance and careless words turn the people who actually love us into impenetrable fortresses that lock us out. We build the wrong walls.
It is a devastatingly accurate critique of human priorities. The text uses the imagery of siege warfare, where breaching a city wall took months of starvation and battering rams to illustrate how incredibly difficult it is to repair a shattered trust.
It's not a quick fix.
Not at all. In our highly connected digital age, we see people boasting about thousands of superficial connections on their profiles. But the biblical definition of friendship demands something much deeper.
Because a follower count doesn't mean anything when things get real.
Exactly. A vast network of acquaintances provides zero structural support when your life collapses. The author is arguing that a few fiercely loyal friends cultivated through careful, humble communication are worth infinitely more than surface-level popularity.
So, synthesizing all of this ancient wisdom, it seems like every single one of these behavioral blueprints hinges on one foundational characteristic.
Which is humility.
Yes. Avoiding the deceptive comfort of the isolated echo chamber requires the humility to admit that your own perspective is incomplete.
Right.
Pausing to listen to the cross-examination before you rush to judgment requires the humility to accept you might be wrong. Recognizing the life or death power of your tongue requires the humility to restrain your immediate emotional reactions.
That's a hard one to do.
And acknowledging that your wealth cannot save you requires the humility to seek a higher spiritual refuge.
Humility is literally the mortar that holds this entire architectural blueprint together.
I love that. The mortar.
The text is ultimately arguing that applying this ancient wisdom is the exact mechanism for strengthening one's relationship with the divine and with humanity.
It changes everything.
When a person stops relying on the volume of their own opinions, stops seeking the false security of arrogant independence, and instead runs to the strong tower described in the text, their external behavior changes.
They stop building defensive walls out of their own conceit.
And they begin constructing stable, meaningful lives embedded in healthy, resilient communities.
If the premise of this text is accurate, that our words are the primary tools we use to either build up or tear down the world around us, it raises a question that extends far beyond our own immediate comfort.
What's that?
We've talked about the fortresses we build for ourselves, but we haven't touched on the permanence of those structures. If words build fortresses, what kind of walls are we building for the next generation to inherit based on how we speak, how we listen, and how we judge people today?
That is a profound implication. The environment of communication we create right now, whether it is a toxic landscape of quick judgments and deep wounds, Or a resilient community built on patient listening and profound loyalty becomes the exact cultural blueprint our children will use to build their own lives.
We aren't just constructing our own reality, we are laying the foundation for theirs.
Exactly. Which means every single text message, comment, or conversation you have today is an opportunity to literally speak life into someone's world or drain it away.
That is a weight and a responsibility that should absolutely change how we approach every single interaction. The structural integrity of your life and the lives of those connected to you is being built right now. One word, one patient pause, and one act of humility at a time. Thank you so much for exploring these ancient blueprints with us today. How will you apply this information in your life?